Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. It is Tuesday, October the 13th, and I'm reporting here for our weekly COVID update on the status of the Westchester coronavirus outbreak. From my office here in the county office building, we have avoided going into the normal media room to reduce the number of people that are involved in the direct conveyance of our information. We're trying as best as we can, in light of the events of last week, which I'm going to chat about, to reduce any exposure that any of our folks have. We have been doing these remotely for a while in the media room, so that members of the media, to the greater extent, can observe this, take the video if they need it, and ask questions remotely. We've had some in-room presence, but we're reducing that for this report since we are still within a parameter of time since last week's concern that occurred at the Board of Legislators that the executive branch was involved in. Our COVID numbers, candidly, are moving in a different direction. We were very proud that after our peak situation of March, April, a little bit of early May, that we started to move down. We flattened the curve, and throughout May, June, July, August, and a fair bit of September, if not all of September, our numbers were very stable and very good. We had major reductions. I constantly talked about how at one point we had 1,200 people hospitalized, and we got that number down to small double digits. We had active cases at high as 12,000 active cases, and we brought it down into the 400 range over the course of a period of time. But we must be candid. If there's good news and we report it, then there is not as good news, and we report that as well. But I do want to put it in perspective so that we understand that what we're seeing is something of concern, but it is not a crisis. However, whatever is going to happen in the days to come, we're going to monitor, and then we're going to act off of that information and try to make the best possible decisions that we can here at the county level. And we want you as a resident to know the information that we know to the greatest extent possible. There will be questions that you would ask that we can't answer right off the top of information, but we'll be as open as we can and as realistic as we can. First of all, the numbers most recently from the tracker of yesterday, Monday, October 12th. We do not have the Tuesday numbers in yet, and we will look at them carefully because Monday's numbers were very concerning. The year-to-date total number of positives in Westchester County reached 39,001 positive cases. That's out of a total testing base of 736,097 tests. I can now commit that I am one of those 736,000 cases having been tested last week myself. The vast majority of the tests came up negative. Out of 736,000, only 39,000 were positive, meaning almost, not quite, 700,000 people that were negative tested. However, we calculate our number of active cases by subtracting from that total the number of positive cases that we had 2 weeks ago. And 2 weeks ago, our number was 38,133. That leaves us 868 active cases of COVID infection in Westchester County. What does an active case mean? I've said this before, but I'll repeat it again for those watching today who may not have heard it from before. An active case is somebody who's tested positive and has not yet cleared the 2-week incubation period of the disease. If you have tested positive, no matter how good you feel, no matter what therapeutic treatment you may have taken, whatever you're having in terms of symptoms or lack of symptoms, if you've tested positive, you are an active case that is being monitored and looked at through the course of a 14-day period. So if you tested positive at any point in time prior to 2 weeks ago today, and you did not get sick, and you did not have, obviously, a fatal circumstance, then you are considered to be cleared of the disease. However, if you haven't reached that 2-week period, you're considered to still have an active case of COVID. And as of today, there are 868 people that have identified as active case of COVID. That number has been dramatically rising over the last week. A week ago, we'll use Monday numbers, even though today's Tuesday. If we're comparing yesterday's Monday number at 868, a week ago, it was at 678 active cases. That's an increase of almost 200 active cases within the context of a week. If you go back to 2 weeks ago, we had 562 active cases. That's 300 additional cases in 2 weeks, active cases. Now, that statistic alone is a dramatic statistic, but it does not tell the whole story. So you can't take the number of active cases and run to market with it and say, this is an example of the second wave has arrived. We are also testing many more people lately than we have before. Our test numbers, as an example, over the last week, on Saturday the 10th, we tested 7,337 tests. On Friday the 9th, 7,257 tests. On Thursday the 8th, 7,634 tests. That amount of testing is much greater if you go back over those 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, Monday, we tested 2,944, and we had the day before that, we had tested a similar amount in the 3,000 to 4,000 range. So the more people you test, even at the same percentage of infection, you will get more absolute number of cases. So that alone is not a statistic to worry about. However, there are other statistics, and you have to take them all into account. And yesterday, the Sunday into Monday testing had 107 new cases of coronavirus. That's the largest single day number that we've had since May. We had a day similar, 107 cases back in May, just about right after Memorial Day. We had that type of an input number. And of course, if you go back to the peak period of time, we've forgotten this, I would suspect, but we had day after day in April where we had 300 some odd people test positive every day and test positive, not just total testing, tested positive. So that added to our active case number as we rose up the bell curve back in late March and early April. Of the people that have now been deemed an active case of 868, that number of people that get seriously sick becomes the next number that we look at with care, which is how many people are hospitalized. And at present, the last number we have is Sunday's number. 43 people are hospitalized right now in Westchester County for COVID. That number may have changed because of Monday's situation and today's situation. However, over the course of the prior week, from Monday, October 5th until Sunday, October 11th, we had a steady rise in hospitalizations. We went from 27 hospitalized on Monday, and that'd be Monday a week ago yesterday, 27 to 36 to 37 to 39 to 42, drop back a shade to 41, then up to 43. That steady rise in hospitalization, ultimately from 27 to 43, is a concerning number. If you go back again over a number of weeks, we had at various points in times in late April, 860 people hospitalized for COVID. If you take a look back, hospitalizations in the first day of June was 233 people. So there's a big diminution. But at 233, you're still talking 5 times the amount of people that we have hospitalized now. So our number of 43 is dramatically up from 27, 22, but it does not approach yet what we had in peak periods of time. And that's how you have to look at these things in a balanced way. Our fatality numbers, we have lost now, year to date through Monday, 1,462 residents of Westchester County. We took great pride in the fact that we went through a month with 3 or 4 or 5 fatalities, 6 fatalities, I think, in the month of August, somewhat less than that in the month of September. However, over the last week, if you take Monday the 12th and you go back to Monday the 5th, we lost 5 individuals in the last week. And again, every individual that we lose is a tragedy. It's someone important to somebody out there, to a lot of somebodies out there. But 5 fatalities in a week is an interesting number because the prior week we lost 1. The week before that we lost 2. The week before that we lost 1. The week before that we lost 1. And the week before that, which gets us back to the last week of August, we had no fatalities for the week. So in the last week we've lost 5. Now, why is that important? Well, it's not important in and of itself as a sign that we're back to where we were in April. But if that number continues, if we start to lose multiple people on a given day, if that higher number of active cases becomes a higher number of hospitalization and a higher number of fatalities, then we are looking at something very serious. But we're looking at these numbers in their relative newness, in their relative infancy. And we're sharing this with you so that you're not surprised by it. Most people want to know what's happening in my town or my community. 5 days a week, we publish, circulated out, a map of Westchester County that gives us the total number of cases year to date. That's a part of that number of 39,000 that I talked about. And then the number of active cases we have by community, and that adds up to the 868 number that I shared with you. We release that to the press. You'll see it in a number of different publications. You'll see it generally in online publications where they can replicate the map fairly easily. You'll see it on the LOHUD's website. You'll see it on myride.com, on Patch, on Daily Voice, a number of other institutions that can function that way. Not every media outlet can produce a map and share that with you the same way. But it will give you the idea of the number of cases by community. Now, people have asked for all different kinds of additional statistics. I like zip code. I like to know on the street that I live on. We're working off of statistics that were given by the state of New York. They subdivide it the way they subdivide it, and that's all we have to work off of. So it is not an unwillingness on our part to try to get further down to the numbers. But I must say, just to grind the numbers every day is not the most productive use of our time. We want to present numbers as an indicator, and then we want to take certain actions that represent how we respond to this. Our circumstances right now, and we'll monitor what happens today. Certainly, number one is we continue testing. Testing is identified by every public health entity as the first step in the process. The second step in the process is to, having identified by a test who's positive, is to use the contact tracing system to identify who has been in contact with a person who tests positive. And we had a chance to test that system last week. On Wednesday, late in the day, County Legislator David Tubiello, who represents Yonkers and a part of Mount Vernon, indicated that he had tested positive for COVID. He made that information aware to his colleagues in the Board of Legislators and to those of us in the executive branch. A week prior to that, on October 1st, we were all together for a raising of the Italian American flag to honor Italian American Heritage Month. Those of us of Italian descent, I'm part Italian American, were there, and we had a jovial opportunity, a jovial time. It was shown on videotape, and on videotape you'll see we're all wearing masks, and at least when we're standing, waiting to speak, we're in social distancing. But people do tend to move about. We worked off of the same podium when we spoke, so quite a few of us then were determined by public health that we needed to be tested for COVID. So we did that immediately on Thursday. I tested negative, and so did the others that tested. In fact, every other person, Chairman Ben Boykin tested negative, other members of the legislature, other members of the executive branch, all tested negative. And we were very clear about that. I had a press availability on Thursday afternoon before I got my test results, and we shared that. So there was no surprise. There was no question of what happened. I made the decision with the help of our Director of Communications, Catherine Chaffee, to cancel Thursday night's planned State of the County message. Now, the State of the County message is, at county government, it's a big deal. It is important for us to, and for myself as county executive, to share with the legislative body and to the people of Westchester where I think we are. We generally do that in the month of April. But in this particular case, we had postponed it to October because of the extent of the pandemic, and we clearly did not feel that we could give you an idea of what's happening in the county until we knew what was happening in the county. And so much of this year has been all about COVID. We may want to talk about other issues. I may want to talk about what we're doing in the census, which is important. I may want to talk about what we're doing in food scrap recycling, and that's important, in affordable housing and electric vehicle charging stations. All of those things are important. But the COVID-19 outbreak is right now the main event in our lives. It's shaped our lives, not for the better. And so how well we deal with this issue really is at the top of our list. So having set the date for October 22nd, we knew that we could not put workers at jeopardy. We could not have legislators in jeopardy. And I needed to do a precautionary quarantine. Since I tested negative, not positive, it was a precautionary quarantine to make sure that I did not come down with the disease and that I remained symptom-free. I was assigned a contact tracer who called me every day to check how I was doing, and I told her I was doing fine, but she checked in with me. She also reminded me that I was not to be out in the community. Now, you can just imagine how hard that is for me. But the bottom line is, from Thursday on, I did what I was asked to do: Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and Sunday, and Monday. I am eligible, because of the nature of my responsibilities, to come into the office, and only that, not stop by and have dinner someplace on the way home. And so I honor that commitment throughout the period of this time. I am symptom-free. All of my colleagues are symptom-free. And the added good news is that Legislator Tubiello has been retested, and he is tested negative in the follow-up test. He's had 2 follow-up tests, and he's been negative on both of those tests. So the outbreak did not turn out to be an outbreak. It turned out to be a single positive, but the system worked. Contact tracing got all of us involved. We were all tested, and had any of us been positive, we were prepared with a list of the people we had interacted with over the prior period of time, so that they could be contacted and tested and either quarantined or isolated, depending on the outcome. This is a laborious process, and I've been giving these statistics out in this fashion for the better part of 8 months. We were doing it daily. Now we've fallen back to doing it weekly. We'll revise that as we see the need going forward. But every day when I talk about how many people were tested, now I'm one of those people in that number. Had I been positive, I would have been one of those numbers in the positive. And right now, I wouldn't be talking to you from my office. I would be in isolation and unable to interact in person with anyone. But we are healthy and free. But it's important that the system works, and it's important that you know the system works, because we are not going to defeat this disease with rhetoric. We are not going to defeat this disease by talking about what I consider to be fantasy cures, quack cures, if you will. People that say, oh, well, such and such a medicine helped 4 people. And it may have helped 4 people, and that's good. But that's not an across-the-board insurance policy. That is not a license to go back out and resume your normal life. And I understand we're in the middle, certainly, of a national political campaign or state campaigns that are going on right now. The urgency of campaigning in the last few weeks of an election, I know very well. I've lived that for 16 general elections. But just as important as my State of the County address and the fanfare that goes with it was something I looked forward to. I was prepared for it. We had to cancel it on a dime. And we did it because it was the right thing to do. And I would say that that's the right thing to do in a lot of other cases. And where you can't meet in person, you use electronic means, as we're doing right now, to communicate with you. I understand there's some protesting about having an electronic debate. Well, you shouldn't be face-to-face if you're not sure that you're cleared of a positive. It's just not appropriate. It's not right. I don't care who you are, what you think. If you have not been cleared from a positive test, and it takes 14 days to be sure that you're cleared of positive tests. And I'm told that, the higher levels of government, people are tested all the time. Higher levels of business, they're tested constantly to make sure that they're COVID-free, and that's a good thing. But the bottom line is, even if you test negative, there's the precautionary isolation, which is X number of days afterwards, notwithstanding essential responsibility. So we followed the system exactly as the system laid out. And just as happened, if you may recall, a little over a month ago, there was a concern about a potential outbreak in a Catholic church in Pleasantville, Holy Innocence Church. 2 priests tested positive, and 1 worker. And of course, they had celebrated daily mass, they had celebrated a communion event, and then they had a full complement of Saturday night and Sunday masses, for which the congregants of that church and their visitors and guests and friends attended. And I happen to be Roman Catholic myself, so I'm familiar with the church ritual and the process. I go on a regular basis. They had taken precautions in that church, as they have all throughout the Archdiocese of New York, and as have many other religious institutions, not just Catholic, but other Christian, Muslim, Jewish faith, other faiths. They're all taking these precautions. In this particular case, the priest wore a mask. In this particular case, the priest sanitized his hands regularly. In this particular case, there was no congregation of congregants after church, which is a usual thing that happens. Anybody who goes to religious service, after the service, you might have a cup of coffee together, you might talk in the parking lot. How are you? What's going on? All of that has been eliminated, even to the point that there is, in the Catholic ritual, a sign of peace where you actually shake hands with the person next to you. You don't do that now. So all of those provisions followed, and they tested over the weekend after the infection, which is in the early part of September, literally hundreds of people from Pleasantville who might have been exposed. Not one of them came down with the virus. So it tells you once again, as frustrating as it is to wear a mask, as frustrating as it was for me to go take the test is not awful. It's nothing I want to do. I wouldn't sign up to do it again unless I had to do it, but I did it, and it's behind me. And if I have to do it again, I'll do it again. The not knowing until the test results come back, that anxiety and that unsurety, how that impacts the people that you work with, the people that you're related to, the people you interact with. Everybody's on tenterhooks until you know whether you're positive or not. And then the fear that if you are positive, will you really get the disease? Will you really suffer from the disease? I've talked to people who have recovered from COVID and who've had some relatively severe cases of COVID. They survived. They did not become a fatality statistic, but they had a terrible, terrible illness. And perhaps we would do well to listen to their stories every so often in a media context, and particularly if you could do it in a visual media context. Because when I talked to one woman in Westchester, talked to a fellow who is a municipal appointed official, spoke to another gentleman not too long ago, and every one of them reports just how seriously their whole body was affected by this disease, not just their breathing. So it's serious. And it's serious not only because death can follow, but it's also serious because it could injure you, hurt you, and give you some potential long-term effects. We don't know the long-term effects having recuperated from this because we haven't gone long enough for people to see what it does to your immune system and so forth. So, sorry to cough in the middle of this, but the upshot of it is that the concerns that we have now are legitimate concerns in a county where we have seen the worst of this disease, and we have rebounded from the worst of this disease to see some of the better responses. We have had a component of Westchester people who will not wear masks. Some of them fall into the young age category of people who are young, healthy, and sort of disregard any personal effect of these diseases, and they enjoy being social. They've gone through, the summertime, vacation period, beach period, high school graduation, going back to college in the fall, and they just will not subject their social life to the restrictions of a mask. And you have those people who hold ideological positions and views, and you're certainly entitled to believe whatever you want in this society, but they impute political philosophy where it is really public health philosophy that governs social distancing, hand washing, and sanitization, mask wearing, and things of that nature. So that portion of Westchester that chooses not to do these things may individually or may not individually be affected by this disease, but they represent a portion of the society that is still, whether they think so or not, vulnerable to the disease. And then all the rest of us that could still contract the disease, even though we ourselves are trying to do everything to the best of our ability. So Westchester, to a greater extent, has had a greater level of compliance than other places. And, during the summertime, I've had the opportunity to see places outside of Westchester County, and it's a mixed bag as to how much compliance there is. We have worked very closely with our school districts since they have gone back to hybrid. Some are still remote, some are hybrid, meaning both remote and in-person education. We have had some individual positive testings in buildings. Our county health department has worked directly with school superintendents, and I think effectively so far. There have been none of those that have turned into a widespread outbreak to be concerned about. We have had a cluster at a couple of local colleges, and most recently, now last few days, we understand that there was a significant cluster at Iona College in New Rochelle. That's a college I'm well familiar with. My daughter's a graduate of that school. I've been on campus in innumerable times for a variety of activities and efforts. Apparently, there were 69 positive cases that have come up in Iona. Some number of them are reflected in our numbers in Westchester County. I'm not sure quite how they're all calculated, but the upshot of it is that the college administration has worked closely with the County Department of Health to identify, track, contact trace, and then isolate all of those positive cases. I don't know the specifics of how they contracted it. It was in some group setting of some number of students, and I assume they were not taking the proper precautions. But whatever it was an example of how the system can break down if individuals just choose not to follow certain provisions. Now, the governor is tasking local governments, meaning counties, cities, towns, villages, school districts within their schools, to enforce the regulations that he has created. And he has used his executive power to mandate certain things, and now we have to use our authority to enforce that. And that puts our enforcement personnel, our police, and the people that manage our various functions where we interact with people, our parks department and health department and so forth, that we have to be the bearers of the bad news to people that don't want to hear it, that you must wear a mask or you can't enter here. You must make sure that you do not come within each other's close distances. You must socially distance. And to the extent that some people refuse to hear that message and we have to enforce that message, conflict can easily occur. We're trying to avoid conflict. And the best way to avoid conflict is to have people understand what's at stake. We are now 8 months into a pandemic. Maybe this will be over soon. Maybe it won't be. But whatever it has claimed 1,462 lives here in Westchester County alone, over 210,000 nationwide. And I just want to interject. I have heard people, and some of the hearing I see in Facebook and so forth, where people want to contest the numbers. They say, oh, well, it really wasn't the number. And, it sounds like the excuses I used to make when I brought home a bad report card. I would try to explain away to my parents why I got a C. It really was the teacher didn't like me, and oh, well, they didn't tell us what was on the final, and then the final was different. And you got to see. You got to see. Did you learn anything from it? Or are you going to try to explain it away and tell yourself that you really had a B when you really didn't know the subject, and that's why you got the C? Now, of course, the older George Latimer could tell the younger George Latimer, stop making excuses for what you know you made a mistake on, and just be a man, learn from your C, and make it a better grade next report card. And that, I think, is what I'm seeing when I hear people try to explain away the number of deaths and the number of people hospitalized. They're trying to say this is all core morbidity. These are other people are sick anyway. Well, I'll tell you what, they might have been sick anyway. And if it wasn't for COVID, maybe they would have perished a year from now or 2 years from now. But those are years of life, years of love with their family, another Thanksgiving with their grandchildren, another opportunity to sit with a friend and watch the World Series, or to watch, the flowers grow. And they died in May, or they died in June, and they didn't live until next fall or 2 years from now, when their comorbidity might have become fatal. It's not for us to play God and to say, well, you would have died anyway. So I find it very offensive when I hear people talking about that. And it often is coupled with them making the rationale that these people are going to die anyway. Why do I have to suffer? Why do I have to wear a mask? Why am I restricted from doing the things that I want to do in my life? We make these accommodations for other people, maybe for ourselves. We don't know, and when you find out that you may have been infected by this disease, all of a sudden it's not a theoretical challenge. It's you, the person, that's directly affected. We all react differently to it. But if the president can get it, and if the county executive can be tested for it, then it can happen to anybody. Absolutely anybody. You can't sequester yourself away from the world. You live in the world and you're exposed, and you may yet get it, or you may yet think you may have gotten it and require a test and isolation. If we are going to be so selfish as to say, I can't sacrifice anymore. For these 8 months, I've sacrificed enough. I don't care. I don't care if I get it and I give it to somebody else, but I don't suffer from it. Those are the breaks of life. That's really what you're saying. When you say, I'm going to go to a large grouping of people without a mask, and I'm going to laugh and I'm going to cheer, and I'm not going to worry about this stuff. You're putting yourself in jeopardy, and worse, you're putting other people in jeopardy. In a sense, that's really no different than driving drunk. In a sense, you're putting yourself in jeopardy behind a wheel, and you're putting other people at jeopardy whom you don't know, and you're doing it because it's convenient to you, you think, to just make the drive home, park the car in the driveway, and then go sleep it off, not knowing that down the road you'll cross the double yellow line, take somebody else's life, even if you don't take your own. And it's a sign of tremendous selfishness. And I think as the numbers go up, that's the single biggest message. We need to continue to show discipline, and we need to double down on discipline. Not because I say it, not because Anthony Fauci says it, but because it is the practical understanding of the scientists around us who are schooled in communicable diseases. And they tell us, without a vaccine and without a viral treatment, you must do certain things. Otherwise, the virus will spread. And even if the percentage is 4%, 4% of the people will die. This is not the flu. Anybody who says it is misinformed, if not outright lying for their purposes. This is not the garden variety flu. It isn't. And it also isn't a joke. And talk to somebody who's recuperated from COVID, who can tell you what they went through, and you'll understand just how serious it is. Now, in terms of the actions we may take going forward, we're looking at all of our different county functions. We obviously don't have anything happening at the county center. It's still being held in abeyance as backup hospital space. If we need it, we're using it for some medical procedures now. Most of our summertime recreation programs now have come to a close. Bicycle Sunday has 2 more weekends at hand. The next 2 weekends will continue Bicycle Sunday. That's an extension of our normal period of time. Obviously, our beaches and pools have closed. It's no longer warm enough to be in the beach and the pool anyway. And most of our parks are used for individual walking, bicycling, activities like that. The golf courses remain open. I am not a golfer. My friends who are golfers would probably tee off on New Year's Day if there wasn't any snow on the ground. We will establish a closing date for golf, because we do need to make sure that the greens and the fairways recuperate from as vigorous a year as we've had. We've had a record year in public golf. If the whole county government could be judged by public golf, we had about a year. But we've also not spread the disease, which is what's important. We are looking at making some modifications. I'll give you an example of one we just decided on today. Next week, we're going to have back-to-back nights of a budget forum. It's an executive branch function where we're opening up for people to comment and give us general input before we finalize the county budget. County year operates, the fiscal year operates on a calendar year. So January 1st begins our calendar year. We deliver to the Board of Legislators the budget document in mid-November. And so we established this a couple of years ago when we were new administration, and we wanted people to come and be able to talk to us, tell us what they think we should prioritize before we make final decisions in the budget. Those two sessions are coming up Monday, the 19th of October, Tuesday, the 20th of October. We originally wanted to have a dual situation, which is both a virtual public hearing, as we would use this format, and then also an in-person public hearing, because not everybody has electronic equipment. Not everybody's comfortable with WebEx or whatever format platform we use. Zoom is also a common one. And we didn't want to eliminate those people, so we would have both an in-person and a virtual. With that cliche phrase and abundance of caution, we are going to have the in-person session, but only Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins and myself as County Executive will be present in the room. We have other important staff people, Joan McDonald, our Director of Operations, our Deputy Director of Operations, our Budget Director, Deputy Budget Director, a host of other individuals that would be interested in hearing the testimony. They will be connected online. But myself and the Deputy County Executive will be in person to listen to in-person testimony. We will socially distance the room in person. There will be hand sanitizer expected by everybody to use it. You will wear a mask or you will not enter the room. And when you finish whatever your testimony is, you drop off your testimony written form, you will exit the room. And we will do everything we can to empty out the room for those that come in person to be heard. We will hear them, and then we will close down that portion of the public hearing, then go to the virtual public hearing. That's what we're going to do for Monday and Tuesday. We are scheduled to be Monday the 19th in the New Rochelle City Council chambers, which is an old high school auditorium, so there's plenty of space for social distancing. And then the following night, Tuesday the 20th, will be at the Mount Kisco Library in their main meeting room, which is a sizable enough room for our purposes. It's been used in the past for these kind of public sessions, and we don't think we'll get that much in person. Now, we're going to continue as well on Thursday, I believe, probably Tuesday, October 27th, to continue our public forum for our police reform task force. And that task force will have also public input in person and virtually at 3 locations. And we'll talk more about that next week when I speak with you then. But the bottom line is the 27th, we will do the same format. There it is the police task force leadership that is running the meeting, not the county executive offices. So we may have a little bit different structure of who's in the room, but we're going to try to make sure there's an option, but we're going to try to reduce the number of people that could be exposed to any outbreak should it occur. We have rescheduled the State of the County message at this point for October 22nd. I'm not sure if we've completely finalized that date, but that's our new working date. We'll certainly announce it for the press purposes as soon as we can, and then we'll go from there. All of those things will be appropriate. I'm not going to take up any other time reporting on any of the element of county government, except to mention that since it is time sensitive, that the census now is within the last 19 to 20 days, a little less than 3 weeks of operation. We have exceeded, as Westchester County, our numbers from 2010 and 2000. We are ahead of the state, and we'll finish ahead of the state. It looks like we'll finish ahead of the United States as a percentage of reporting homeowners. We have a couple of communities that are still under 60% reporting. 2 communities, we'd like to get them up and over that number if that's possible. We've had 7 communities that have reached the 80% level. There's a couple just shy of that, a couple of those in the high 60s, just shy of 70. The bottom line is to try to get as accurate a count. I think it's pretty clear to me that we've done a terrific job. And it's not we, the county executive's office, it's the people in county government who have been committed to the complete count, and in local governments as well. We work with local committees. It has been a very difficult time to count because of COVID. Many of the activities we would have used just were outside of our ability to conduct, but I'm still pleased that we've had some success. But with that, I'm going to end my general commentary. We'll go to some questions before we close this out. We want to see if Catherine Chaffee has any remote questions for us. Catherine?
Yep, we have a number of remote questions today. So the first one comes from Jonathan Gordon from News 12. He asks, what does the county health department know about where and how the outbreak began at Iona College? Did it start at an off-campus party?
This Jonathan Gordon from News 12 has asked about the start of the Iona outbreak and how it happened. We do not have in our circumstances the specific details. I am sure that the Department of Health, because of contact tracers, probably have some of that information. I think the HIPAA laws apply at the moment, where we can't reveal names which we may receive in the process of doing our duty and then reveal it to public circumstances. We do understand that there was an event of some sort that was not sanctioned by the college itself. It wasn't a college event, but it was college students at the event, and that was the source of the infection. But more details than that, I don't know, and I'm not sure if I do know it, I'm in a position to be able to reveal it.
Okay. The next question comes from Samantha Crawford, also from News 12. Regarding the 190 new active cases in the last week, are we seeing hotspots or clusters, or are these cases spread throughout the county? Are you seeing patterns in terms of how people are contracting the virus? For example, parties, school, crowded businesses, etc.
From Samantha Crawford, News 12, question about the pattern of infection. What we're looking at outside of the Iona cluster, which is concentrated, we're looking at the higher population centers of Westchester County having the higher numbers. The smaller, less densely populated communities are not showing a significant increase. We think that probably represents, and this is thinks because we don't have a way to track each individual positive, and contact tracing helps make connections for us a little bit. But we think that people are dropping their guard a little bit. We think that folks, don't see the virus as having advanced here for a while, and so therefore more likely where you concentrate in the big cities of the county and the more concentrated villages, you are less likely to wear masks. You are certainly less likely to socially distance. And by the way, having a mask on is not a substitute for social distancing. They work together in concert. If we are within an inch or two of each other, the masks will still reduce a certain amount of virus spread, but a certain amount of virus spread still comes on the perimeters of the mask. And if you are up close and personal, as can happen in a cluster of people, you can still be exposed to the disease even with the mask on. But the mask reduces it under normal circumstances when added to social distancing, those two factors together. So what we think, Samantha, is that what we're seeing is, some willingness of people, probably in parties, private area parties, because public meetings have been dramatically reduced. There's so few of them. The holiday, the celebration of Columbus Day usually engendered some parades and some big ceremonies. All of those things have gone by the wayside over this past weekend. That what we're seeing is the natural cluster of people living in close quarters in densely populated areas and then being exposed to the disease to a greater extent. And I might add, as the weather starts to get colder, more and more activity inside. We're not there yet, but we're moving in the direction of more inside behavior, which we fear will spread the disease.
Okay. The next question comes from Martin Wilbur. He actually has two.
Okay.
So the first one is the percentage of positive cases of greatest concern when looking at the numbers or something else?
Well, I think the greatest concern, Martin, this is Martin Wilbur from the Examiner publications, the greatest concern that I have is the percentage of infection on any given day. So if we had 100 cases, but if we had 100 people tested and one person tested positive, that is a 1% infection ratio. If you had 900 people tested and 9 of them were infected, that's the same ratio. That's still the same 1% ratio. But you have 8 extra people walking around with the disease, as far as you know. So the volume matters and the percentage matters. So I look at the volume and then I look at the percentage. And the percentage factor has not jumped up to a danger zone. I may have alluded to this earlier in my presentation. We've been around 1%, slightly below, sometimes slightly above. A couple of days now, we've jumped up closer to 2%, but it's not been every day. And we certainly haven't gotten up to 6% or 10%, which is some of the numbers you're seeing in the hotspot areas. If the percentage of infection when coupled with the total amount of cases starts to rise. So if we see, we have 100 extra cases, and that's 100 cases, not at a 1% or a 2% infection ratio, but it's a 6% infection ratio, then alarm bells start going off, and that's when we start to look at societal actions. And keep in mind, Governor Cuomo is looking at these things. I have a certain amount of power allocated as county executive, but the governor has taken the responsibility for making the broad-based societal decisions. If all restaurants are going to be closed, if he's going to reclose anything that he opened, he will make those decisions. We will control a much smaller portion of the world that we deal with. Oftentimes the recreational facilities, our county workforce, those types of decisions.
The second question is, are there any concrete steps for the county to take to limit cases, or is it making sure that the system works and communicating important information?
Well, I think we certainly are trying to do that every way we can. Right now, the society is focused on the disease, but they're not necessarily focused on the county government's response to the disease. And I think that's why it's important for our national leaders to reflect the right policies, because they're the people that everybody have their eyeballs on. You could probably stop 10 people in the street, ask them who the county executive is, and would you get a couple of right answers? Hopefully, maybe not. May get no right answers. Ask them who the president of the United States is, and you will get 10 for 10 correct answers of who the president is. So the responsibility of public education is on all of our hands, but the ability to affect the public is much greater where more people know who you are, where, like Cheers, where everybody knows your name. So we are going to certainly try to use every tool at our disposal to maintain that public information that we have to have. But, excuse me. But I think the reality is that the actions that we take in response will have to be actions that will at times restrict the interaction between people. We've done a fair bit of that already as a county government. There are a few other areas that we could work in, but that's what we'll do if those numbers, Martin, don't come down. And those restrictions will be to try to limit places where people can interact. The big two things that have just happened was back to school K to 12, back to school college. Those things are out of our control, and we'll see whether or not the circumstances gets to the point at which the governor feels a need to act in that area.
Okay. And the last question comes from David Proper. How critical is the week ahead for the county after the sharp uptick in cases from Sunday testing?
David Proper from the Journal News. Well, I think it's very important. I would like to see that the trend flattens out. Today's numbers are probably going to be available on the tracker as soon as I get off of this video. And we'll hope that the numbers level or drop a little bit, and that'll be a bit of a spike that has now been absorbed into the whole. But, this week is important, but then I can honestly say each week will be important, because what's happening out in the society is changing with the weather. And even if we had 2 or 3 good weeks, let's say that it dropped dramatically and went down a couple of weeks, we'd say, well, whatever that was, we survived it. But then more people going indoors, and we would look to see if it spikes up. I think we're all killing time until we get a reliable vaccine. That's really what we're doing. We're trying to manage something that's unmanageable until we can get a vaccine in which we know we've got something that can deal with it. And if we don't get a vaccine, we get an antiviral treatment. And I say that for a reason. The HIV epidemic, which was significant 20 some odd years ago, almost 30 years ago, I guess, 40 years ago, whatever that time frame was when it really broke out large. There was no vaccine given for HIV. What there was a combination of therapeutics and viral treatment that then kept an HIV person from getting full-blown AIDS and dying. And that's been remarkably successful. It took 4 years for that to happen. God help us that it would take 4 years for us to get a reliable vaccine. But at this stage of the game, we're dealing with a practical reality, which is until that happens, we have to manage it with, wait for it, testing, contact tracing, isolation, the same tools we've been talking about for 8 months. So, all right. So we want to thank Samantha Crawford from News 12, Jonathan Gordon from News 12, Martin Wilbur from The Examiner, and David Proper from the Journal News, each for providing those questions. I don't recognize the working press enough. There's always a sense of competition between those of us in office and those who cover us in the press. We don't always like what they say about us. They don't always think we did the right thing. But that is America. That's the freedom of the Fourth Estate. I accept that. And I think we ought to recognize that those who are working on our behalf, particularly in local news, just like those of us in local government, we are not, either as public officials or as journalists, we are not famous. The national media, everybody knows when they see, the Sean Hannitys of the world on TV, or the Chris Wallaces on TV, or the Rachel Maddows on TV. They don't know, all of the folks that work so hard at News 12, or the people that work hard at the Journal News and the weekly newspapers. So I want to thank them for their coverage of these things, because without their coverage, people who live in Chappaqua and Irvington and Pelham would not know what's happening in their backyard. They know the national scene, but they wouldn't know the backyard if it wasn't for these people. And I appreciate their work. And that's one of the reasons why we do this remotely, because we don't want to expose them. We don't want them to go home to their spouses or their little kids or their parents and potentially give them something that is unwanted. So with that all, thank you very much for watching. This is a less comfortable environment for me to speak in this kind of a format. I know I went on for 45 minutes, but hopefully to give you an honest picture, we will continue to track